Good morning, welcome. Glad to see more coming in. We'll give them just a minute or two. But while we do that, maybe we can recap yesterday. Was that an amazing day for you as it was for me? Come on. First off, Eddie gets up here and just plants himself on this platform and just starts preaching. You know, how does he do that? It's just the accent. And then Dillis gets up and says, I'm going to worship till I pass out. I never passed out from worshiping, but I'm ready. I'm ready now. Brendan gets up. The opposite of consumerism is community. Enough said. Take that home and change your life. Sam, mingle, proclaim, demonstrate, cry a little bit. Joe, you can't have the cross without the kingdom. Girl preachers. And Sam. I'm sorry, it's because we're friends. We can say that stuff. 3 years ago today, 5 guys, a couple other people across the planet checking in on Skype. No particular reason other than we deeply needed some other conversation than what we've been having for so long. That's it. That's it. We're not foolish enough to believe that we started a Jesus conversation. That's silly. But born out of deep relationship came a desire for something more. And let's be clear, it's selfish at first, for us. And then you realize I need this for my family. And I need this for my friends and my community and my church. And somehow that conversation resonated like a shot through tiresome people who were tired of the conversations we've been having. And so we end up here today with you, committing time, money, effort, prayer, spiritual commitment to saying we want to talk about Jesus, and Jesus only, and just Jesus, and Jesus all. Why is that a new conversation? Why isn't that the only conversation? It's not new, it's not novel. It's it. It's simple and it is truth. Even the music, lifting up the name of Jesus, sometimes a different spirit than what we experience in other places, yeah? And friends, I would say it this way. Happy Sunday. I have this fictional conversation in my head that some of you may have had on your way here. You stop at a coffee shop to get something other than coffee, of course, because we're good Adventists. And you're standing there with your Bible in hand, dressed a little bit nicer, and someone says, oh, are you on your way to church? And everything in your Adventist DNA goes, it's Sunday. No. Oh, where are you going to? Well, it's like a convention where like people sit around. We'll sing to Jesus and talk and fellowship and pray. And the person that's staring at you going, yeah, it's church. They're like, well. May we just say it this way. Sometimes Sabbath can't be contained within 24 hours. And sometimes Jesus can't be contained in the words that we say about him. He transcends those too. Did I really say happy Sunday? The person listening to that conversation would have to think weird. And we'd go, no, peculiar. But can't we just own it? Weird. Weird. We've had those conversations where you have to give all that context, right? Oh, Masevi. Oh, what's that? Well, October 22, 1844, there was a... Have you ever seen the glassy stare that people give you? Like, all you have to say is, the great disappointment, and they think, this will be disappointing. You know, because we have to give so much context to this message that we have. Oh, we do this, we don't do that. Context. Have you ever had somebody tell you a story and they go, wait, let me back up a bit? And you think, and then they say, to make a long story short, which means no. Right? And remember, if you've never heard someone in that conversation, then it's you having that conversation. And every time you go, well, let me give you some context, everyone goes, no. Because context can be overwhelming, and we don't necessarily need so much context. We need a little bit more content. But the thing is, we're really good at preaching our context. Really good at it. And it's really important that we make sure everybody understands our content, even within our churches. Have you ever heard a series on the Sabbath where they're trying to convince you the Sabbath is right on Sabbath? In church? On Sabbath? Seems redundant. Right? Because I think a lot of our preaching within our faith communities is us trying to make sure we affirm the context. We're right because we're right, because we're right, because we're right. I had new worshipers that were worshiping with us, and I started doing a series on the Sabbath because I'm a good Adventist. And they go, yeah, we got that. I'm like, do ya? And they're like, we're here. Oh, that's right. I had forgotten. But it's like we're trying to convince people of this context that we have. Like it's important for them to know and recognize it, and so we beat it into their heads. Context. I was telling Eddie last night, sometimes it would be like Eddie and I talking, and Eddie have to keep reminding me that he is a black Jamaican from East London. And as we're talking, he goes, yeah, I'm black Jamaican from East London. Yeah, I got that. And so we're having a conversation. He's like, I'm black, East London, Jamaican. I'm like, brother, I've been to your house. I've had the dirty bird. And if you haven't, he doesn't love you that much. You don't have to convince me because I know. You don't have to convince me, Eddie. I know. I see it. You live it. Don't tell me about your context. Tell me about your content. You don't have to keep telling me you're a black man. I get it. I'm a white man. I don't know if you knew that. And in the end, who cares? I don't care if he's purple. I like him. Well, wait. Okay, let me give you some context. Let me back up a little bit. I'm going to have to. We belong to the great tradition and greater trajectory of Orthodox Christian thought. We're not something different. We're right in line. Yeah. Oh, that doesn't make us special? Because, to quote that famous philosopher, I think his name, I can't remember, he's from The Incredibles, the little kid. He says, if everyone's special, then no one's special. Is that us as Adventists? We don't want to belong to them because we have something different. We have something more. More what? More than Jesus? There are so many people so desperate to protect Adventism, but they forgot that Adventism is just a cradle for a greater expression of who Jesus is. Yeah. They forget about the baby that's in the cradle, and all they want to do is protect that piece of wood. I don't care what you put him in. It's the Jesus that we have to protect. In 2,000 years, there's been but one Christological heresy expressed in two ways. Number one, that which diminishes Jesus, his place, his divinity, or his power, or his sacrifice on the cross. And number two, that which leads to the withered fruit of less love. And that's it. That's all heresy. Simple. We seem to have this very pronounced response to Jesus. First, acceptance and joy, the peace of being saved through the cross of Jesus Christ. Not saved by his cross, but the work that Jesus did on it. A cross without Christ is nothing more than a badly built piece of furniture. But with Jesus, it becomes the plan of salvation. But soon, for some reason, we get buyer's remorse. We get the pushback. It becomes the difference between Jesus paid it all and can I get that on layaway? The question becomes, where do I fit in? And we ask it corporately by saying, where do we fit in? As Adventists, what is our role? So we spend a lot of time trying to figure out exactly what we're supposed to be talking about. That's different. We're either uncomfortable with the cross of Christ or we're uncomfortable with our place in the shadow of it. We somehow want to bring Jesus off the cross. And eventually, we try to find our own way onto it. Because the cross of Jesus couldn't possibly be enough. It couldn't possibly give me enough identity, enough peace, enough grace, or enough salvation. So we scream that age-old question, what must I do to be saved? But maybe we ask it this way, what must I do to be special, or peculiar, or remnant? And then we create a theology around this question, and we have done that with an efficiency of a Tasmanian devil devouring its prey. Nasty creatures. Did you guys have Uncle Dan and Aunt Sue's story hour over here? No? Okay, well, we got it. We didn't export everything. America's been exporting not our best stuff for a long time, diabetes, that sort of thing. Well, I'm kind of glad you didn't get it. You would grow up listening to our story hour, Uncle Dan and Aunt Sue. There was this one particular story called The Measuring Rod. But it wasn't called The Measuring Rod. It was called The Measuring Rod. That was fun to listen to as the sun went down on Friday. Gathered around the radio. The Measuring Rod, which it was a story. I think it may have been a story of a dream. I can't remember it all completely, and I've scoured the internet for it. For some reason, I couldn't find it. You probably Google it and find it today. Don't worry about it. But the story was essentially this. I think the guy was having a dream that Jesus had come down, and what Jesus did is he came down and he placed this ruler, this large ruler, measuring rod, if you will, in the middle of town. And at some particular point the next day, they called all the towns members into the town. And when they did that, they would call up a name, and the person would walk up. And so, the reverend from the town walked up, and everyone thought, oh, he's going to stand next to the measuring rod, and he's going to grow according to, his good works. And this was the theology that was expressed. And I remember the reverend came up, and he didn't grow, he shrunk, and everyone went, oh! And then the cobbler, who was just a simple man, very nice man, whatever, he came, and his good works made him grow. And everyone in the town was judged by their good works, bigger and smaller and smaller and smaller. This is the theology that was being taught to me when I was 7 years old. That scared me. Because I knew one thing. The first thing I knew was this. I don't do enough good works to get to heaven. I don't. I don't even know how many good works it takes to get to heaven. But I know it's more than I'm doing. And at 9 years old, I'm thinking, does making the bed count as a good work? Because I don't like doing that. And is that really what's going to keep me out of heaven? Oh, the angst, the philosophical and theological angst that I had. But I'm a bit older. I'm a bit wiser. And I read the Bible. And I know that it can't be true. Because the cross of Christ is the measuring rod. That is not something we stand up against to see how we measure. That is something that we stand in the shadow of for peace, grace, justice, mercy, and compassion from God to us. Perhaps Moltmann said it best when he said it this way. And for me, that meant whatever can stand before the face of the crucified Christ is true Christian theology. What cannot stand there must disappear. This is especially true of what we say about God. And then he continues, in Christianity, the cross is the test of everything which deserves to be called Christian. Anytime we try and take Jesus off that cross, we have a problem. All heresy begins when we choose a different measuring rod for anything, for everything. Jesus all means that what Jesus did is the apex of what being a Christian is. We make a mistake when we think that all Christian theology is flat. It's not. It all moves towards the cross or results from the cross of Jesus Christ. But perhaps this heretical response of ours makes sense. We always respond by trying to get Jesus off the cross. At a DNA level, we probably know he doesn't actually belong there, and that's true. He should never have had to go, but we put him there. It is repugnant. It is offensive, but that is the power of the cross. That which is anathema is true, and then it saves you. We try to tear him down for the reason that we are just uncomfortable with the picture, or because we think there might be room for us up there, or because he needs our help to save us. But the truth is this: there is no room on the cross for two. But there's room enough in its shadow for the whole world. We don't like to owe anyone anything, so owing Jesus a debt of our lives is uncomfortable, but it is that indebtedness that sets us free. This heretical response we have to Jesus, to his life, death, the cross, and his resurrection can become so institutionalized within one's theology that it doesn't feel like heresy any longer. But then it becomes a question of trajectory. Then it becomes a question of where this group of people is going due to how they hold Jesus within their theology. And I would like to remind us of this. It's not theology that saves us. Jesus holds that place. Our theology continues to be the way that we express our best thoughts about Jesus. But Jesus is not bound by our words. Jesus transcends our theology. One of the purposes of the Gospel of John was to respond to heresy that was springing forth in the first century already, from a very early point, creeping into the thought process of the church. John takes on heresy from the very first word in John 1:1. He simply says, "In the beginning was the Word." Let's put Jesus right where he needs to be. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word, you know it, was God. Okay, so he made his point. He could have just stopped, been like, get it? But he knows we're idiots, so no. He will explain, and moves on. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. Get it? Not yet. I'll write a bunch of chapters afterwards. We see that this one particular phrase that easily stays on our tongue in order to fight this dual approach to heretical thought and practice. We put ourselves in places we shouldn't be. And there's one more story from Scripture I'd like to share with you before I leave today. It's this. Coming John 3:22, John testifies again about Jesus. He says, after this, Jesus and his disciples went into the Judean countryside where he spent some time with them and baptized. Now, John was also baptizing at Aenon near Salem because there was plenty of water. And I love that. He was baptizing because there was water. And that's what you do. Because when you're a Christian and you're talking about Jesus and making straight the way of the Lord, people get really excited and go, can you baptize me? And there was water, so he did it. We make it pretty complicated. There's a baptismal dunkum. Now, John was also baptizing. Here, verse 24. This was before John was put in prison. An argument developed between some of John's disciples and a certain Jew over the matter of ceremonial washing. They came to John and said to him, Rabbi, that man who was with you on the other side of the Jordan, the one you testified about, you've been talking about him for a while. Look, he is baptizing and everyone is going to him. Let's break this open for a second. What's going on? John had an independent ministry that was booming. All right, people were coming to it. They thought it was awesome. They liked what he had to say. He was employing people now, his disciples. They were going along with him. They all had little tasks to do, and they had a following. And once you get a following, don't lose your following. Do whatever it takes to keep people around you. I mean, you know, that's what Jesus did, right? He fed them. Oh, and then the next day he told them, eat me, and they all left. But, well, you know, you can worry about that on your own. So these guys are really concerned because people aren't following John anymore, right? And they're like, this dude, the guy that you've been talking about, he's doing his own thing. He's baptizing over there. And your followers are going to him. What you gonna do? People connected with John, and then he was leaving. You know what's interesting, though, is that John was providing the context for Jesus, right? He was making straight the way of the Lord for Jesus to show up. John preached context so that Jesus, the content, could show up. when the content showed up, there were those following John who still believed in the context over the content. Do you know that good theology held poorly is idolatry? We'll let that settle in a little bit. Anything good held incorrectly can become idolatry. And John got it. His people didn't. But John understood it. So how does John respond? To this, John replied, a person can receive only what is given to them from heaven. Your context is given to you by God. Blessing for this Adventist context. Don't let anyone ever tell you that I'm not going to use that word. That I don't appreciate the Adventist context. I do, because I like me some Vegemite, not Vegemite. That's weird stuff. Vegemite, meat analog. I can eat it. It's good. I like Vespers. Nobody knows what that word means, but I kind of like it. Right? I like getting up on a Saturday morning and going to church and worshiping with people. I like that. I dig that. I like getting up any day and worshiping with people. I think that's pretty awesome too. But I appreciate the blessing of the Sabbath, which we call it. I appreciate all that. I got no problem with context. I just can't hold it over the content. Because every time I do, I'm an idolater. Every time I do, I'm a heretic. I am no longer Christian. You prepared for those terms? You yourselves, he says in verse 28, you yourselves can testify that I said, I am not the Messiah, but I'm sent ahead of him. John's like, I'm not changing what I'm preaching. I've been preaching this the whole time. You guys just weren't listening. From the very early on, I said, I am not the Messiah, but I'm sent ahead of him. The bride belongs to the bridegroom. Now he's using a metaphor so we can understand it. The bride belongs to the bridegroom. The friend who attends the bridegroom waits and listens for him and is full of joy when he hears the bridegroom's voice. That joy is mine. It is now complete. He reminded them that what his content has always been. He uses an illustration. And then he says 8 words that make all the difference in the world. He says the words that fix our theological and behavioral narcissism. He says the words that combat all heresy and all idolatry, all the problems we have as Christians in our relationships, in our community, and in our theology. He simply says in 8 words, he must become greater, I must become less. John knew where he stood. And he knew that the universe didn't revolve around him, but he knew for whom the universe revolved around. That's it. That is the response to heresy, all heresy. He must become greater, I must become less. When it rears its ugly head through perfectionism, exclusivistic remnant theology, last generation theology, time setting, or just general heresy of Christians not loving one another, there is only one response. He must become greater. In our worship, he must become greater. In our communities, he must become greater. In our study, he must become greater. In our marriages and families, he must become greater. In our careers, he must become greater. In our traditions, he must become greater. In our trajectories, he must become greater. In our context, he must become greater. In our content, he must become greater. In all that we are, he must become greater. Everything else falls short. Are you prepared for that? Because it changes it all. It changes it all. And you don't get to complacently continue to do the things that we've always done that have put us right where we are. You know what I love about the Australian church? I love this fact. You guys have encountered this conversation differently than the rest of the world. And I will acknowledge that. Because after the first one project that we did here, one of your brilliant pastors said, you know what? I appreciate the fact that you guys don't tell us what to do. You're reminding us how to be. Right? For how long have we got has Christianity become a self-help? Give me 8 points and tell me how to do this. I don't know how you do Jesus in your life. I don't know how you make him greater in your life. I don't know because I'm not you and I don't live your life. I don't live in your community. I don't live with your wife or husband. Your kids are not my kids. Your job is not my job. Your churches are not my churches. You figure out how to make him greater, and then Jesus is lifted up. It's not a formula, it's a way to be. It is all of our existence. When he says, I am, then he is. That means you're not. That's good. Because who wants to be? Just him. Perfect grace, perfect salvation, perfect compassion, mercy, justice, inclusivity, and passion for us. He must become greater.
Thank you for joining us from wherever you're watching. And if this is the first time you've joined us for the weekend, let me just take a moment to walk you through what we're doing now, what happens next. At the venue here, we've just gone to our table facilitators where our participants are all discussing various questions that Tim's talk just raised. Now, the good news is you can look at those very same questions at the Facebook page, the number one, Digit One project. Go there and you can download the same booklet, the same questions that the groups are looking at here. So take some time to look at that, join in the conversation, and then the facilitators, they'll be doing this for the next little while. At 9:50, we'll join Tim for the questions that have come from our table. So we'll look forward to you joining us in at 9:50 for our Q&A time before our next reflection time. Thank you. We'll see you then. Thank you, tables. I'm sure that constructive content context has given you a lot to think about, and you have been texting in the questions about it. So thank you, Tim. First of all, a question that's been asked several times in different ways, but the same idea is they're saying, hey, if this context thing is Jesus, and if we've all denominations have this same, content, then what's the deal with being Adventist? Why does that make us any different, or why would I be that? Does that make sense? That question's been asked several ways.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think the way people kind of rub up against that question is different from your upbringing. If you're a fifth generation Adventist and maybe didn't choose this in the same way as somebody who chose from lots of different options, who chose Adventism, you're going to feel differently about that question. And I want to respect that and I want to honor that. But I think context, if I can use the metaphor again, context is the cradle. So if our context most profoundly expresses the content, okay, if the context most profoundly cradles the content, if our communities most profoundly express Jesus, then I think that's different, all right? And when I say different, I think that's different than the world. You know, and is it different than other churches? I'm not sure why we're trying to get ahead up necessarily. I'm not sure we're in competition until every single person is housed deeply within a relationship with Jesus Christ. I don't really feel like we're in competition for people, you know? And, you know, judging by the empty chairs in our churches, apparently we haven't 100% done it yet. So I think, and I know that sounds critical, but I think there's more work to do on the love portion. And when you meet Jesus in a context, that context becomes home. You don't go where Jesus, you know, when you are in a place where Jesus is, you don't go anywhere. So that's a reason to be the absolute best expression of Jesus in our Adventist context. And we have lots of really cool things. I know people from all over the planet, because I'm an Adventist. And when I work with other churches, I don't know those people from all over the world because this is my context and this is where I live. Context is not evil. Context is just not it.
I think that's worth remembering. Okay, so next question, asked in a couple of ways as well. This person, I'm in a large church. You've talked about the answer to heresy or the answer to anything is a greater expression of Jesus. What's that look like when we're arguing in a board meeting?
Don't you love those arguments that always start with, I love you, brother, in Christ, but now I'm going to say some horrible things about you. You know, it's like, Okay, well, I think one of the things we have to understand is structure is what it is. Church structure is church structure. Let's not over-theologize it. Let's say, hey, this is a structure that gets people paid, that makes things function, that makes things work. There's issues with it. I think James White knew that in 1901 when they were restructuring and putting it all together. Earlier when James White said, we do a lot of things that are kind of unbiblical. Let's just put a structure that works together. Let's understand what that is. Okay, I'm not sure God handed us this structure and it's supposed to be this way forever. I think we all can recognize the fact that we need to mess with things. But I think when it comes to personal communication, Jesus has to be expressed within it. And we can disagree. Well, let me give you a biblical example. Road to Emmaus, they were talking about what was happening, but that's not really true. They were arguing together on the way. Can you do that? Can we argue together on the way and still be deeply held within the relationship that Jesus Christ has for us? And how does that work? Well, probably courtesy. Like, don't call each other names. That'll start. Second of all, don't over-theologize things that aren't theologically, important. And not everything is theology. We know that, right? Some people like things more than others. Some people like drums, some people don't. Right? That's a fine conversation to have. But when Jesus likes what I like, because he does. Right? But that's the beginning of fundamentalism that's really dangerous in any conversation.
Okay, you've got a minute to answer this question, and it's going to put you on the spot because I think it probably needs more than a minute, but hey, let's go. So, yesterday Eddie talked about striving. Where does striving interplay with this idea that I don't add anything to the cross or to my salvation? Where does that balance work?
I think striving is important, right? We strive for lots of things in life. I don't have a problem with that. I guess the question to me would be, what are you planning on adding to the cross? What is it that you're going to tape up there that's going to make it better? The walked an old lady across the street, tape. Wash my neighbor's car, tape. I'm not sure what we're trying to add to the cross. Do we think that there's somehow something that's missing from the cross? But do you strive personally? Yeah, you should strive to be a better person. Why? Because you're not there yet. And when I say you, I mean me. We're not there yet. I can be a better dad. So do I strive to be a better dad? I hope I do that. I can strive to be a better husband, in better relationships with people around me, better professional at what I do. I can strive in all these areas. They don't add to the cross because that's been done. That's taken care of, which allows me now to move on. The problem is this, and I know this is going to be longer than a minute, but Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? The very bottom line of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is making sure we're taken care of, right? Well, if we're making a spiritual Maslow's hierarchy of needs, let me say it this way. Stop living on the bottom, because we want to be saved, but then we want to be more saved. Right? It's like with Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the real world, we live on the bottom line because we go, I need shelter, and I get shelter, and I need clothing, and I get clothing, and now I need better shelter and better clothing. So we just live these bottom level lives all the time, never striving to move on. I'm taken care of. I got pants. I got shoes. Let's move on to something greater. I've been saved. Let's move on to living a life of victory, not just victory on my behavior, friends, a truly celebratory, victorious nature of us being saved.
Well, thank you. As I've been sitting here, this has been buzzing with more questions, so you need to be ready in the breaks for a whole lot of interesting questions. Thank you for generating conversations that I'm sure will continue on.